on your face at night and have a beautiful complexion. You think you can stack about 3 layers of junk on top, on the outside, and make you pretty. Listen, your pretty comes from the inside. Amen. Spiritually, that's so too. That's right. You get your heart clean, your spiritual countenance will be all right. You get your stomach clean, your physical countenance will be all right too. Your health is an inside matter. And America is gullible enough to try anything and to buy anything that's advertised on television. Oh, listen. If the women and the men and the boys and the girls would just go back to good, simple Bible living, you'd find it real delightful. Rotten food brings rotten bodies. Liquor drinking, America's favorite relaxation, they say. Now it's in the homes, grocery stores, drug stores, filling stations. Everywhere you find beer and booze and broken homes and shattered hopes and broken hearts. And for liquor drinking, what do you get? You get cirrhosis of the liver, which means the liver just couldn't handle it. The little boy turns white because his old liver's gone. His color's gone. His life's gone. And in a little while, he begins to die. That's sin. That's the death that goes with it. The wages of sin is death. Go ahead and drink. But just remember this. When you go buy a bottle of liquor, you buy a bottle of disease. Right. You're buying you a disease of the liver when you go in this liquor store. I noticed down the road here it says 21 liquor store. 21. I thought, well, what does that mean? Maybe it means that boy's supposed to be 21, but listen, you better be at least 221 before you go in there. Yeah. Whether you're old or whether you're young, no man has a right to put intoxicating beverage in his body. And I'd like to say this. We'll never stop the murder on the highways until we make it absolutely a law with teeth in it for anybody that drinks 1 teaspoonful of intoxicating beverage not to be allowed to drive a car. That's right. I'm not saying you can't drive, but I'm saying you have no right to drink and then drive. That's right. As long as there's alcohol in your blood, you are a portion of an idiot. That's right. And if you don't like that, you go ask your doctor and he'll tell you that it goes to your brain, through your blood. And no man has as much sense after he drinks as he did before he drank. Amen. I live in the land of liquor addicts. I've just come from the jail, and I give it to you. A young man was 24 years old in the jail last week. He sat in one of these bars supposed to be relaxing. An innocent sailor from England was sitting there by his side. They were drinking. They became pals, I guess, though they'd never seen each other. And he said, "Would you drive me back to my ship?" He said, "I sure will." But on the way back, he picked up a hammer, and so far as we know, hammered him down to the ground. Now then, the sailor's dead. The man's facing life in the penitentiary. And little innocent children will pay the price. And a broken-hearted wife that came to see me the other day, just before I left. And yet, I'll have to say, that young man's one of the finest young men I've ever met in my life in a jailhouse. He plans to give the rest of his life to the Lord and in His service. But oh, just that one night of drinking, that can be repeated thousands and thousands and thousands of times. Never had a crossword, Brother Olaf. I don't know why I did it. I don't even remember what all happened. But I guess I did it. Liquor brings not only physical disease, liquor drinking is a spiritual disease. No man drinks liquor that's right with the Lord. That's right. I don't care if you call him a preacher or whatever he may be. No man drinks liquor if he's right with the Lord. Not even with his boss. Not even at Christmas. Not even at the annual party. Nobody drinks liquor that's right with Jesus.
That's right.
Now, if you think that I'm a little bit stiff or hard, I'm just asking you to live by the way people expect me to live. And I'm glad to live like that. But I'll guarantee you, if you find me circling in and out of these bars after church, you'd stop coming to hear me preach in a big hurry, wouldn't you? And yet, let me ask you this. Do you suppose that Jesus would make much difference between the way I ought to live and the way you ought to live if we're both His children? See what I'm talking about? And so there's this. Of course, I'd say this. I believe every preacher ought to be the best man in the community. I never do. I don't have any patience with a preacher who said, well, I don't know why they expect me to be better than anybody. You ought to be better than anybody else in the community. God not only saved you, called you to preach, He's given you privileges and blessings He's given nobody else.
Amen. Amen.
And every preacher ought to be the best man in the community. Head and shoulders above everything else in his church. Sin. I'm not through. Liquor brings cirrhosis and brain deterioration and mental disorder. Now, I believe we've had another sin in our generation. I'm talking about what's happening in my generation now. I believe we've had a sin in my generation that we've accepted, maybe not as a sin, but I've considered a sin all the time, and that's all this sex education. I just believe that when Mother and Daddy and Grandma and Grandpa and all the rest of them, they didn't know anything about sex education. They didn't have to go off some counselor and get a bunch of lectures on that. And I believe that sex education has had a part in bringing about sex perverts. And we got them by the millions in this country right now.
True.
There was a boy that just got to the city yesterday. I mean, a young boy. Brought by his mother to the city. And he's just in his teens, a sex pervert. And that's all I'm going to say about it, except to say, we've just flaunted this business of sex in our generation's eyes, and I believe we're paying the price with a bunch of sex perverts today. I'm going to say something else I've never said. We've gone into every sort of birth control that you can think about. And it's been discussed in newspapers, and preachers and priests and denominations have talked about birth control, and they've trotted out every device on the face of the earth for birth control. And now then, we've got a bunch of sick women, nervous, neurotic, upset, and disturbed mothers and daddies. Homes. Listen, I still believe that God can take care of all the children He gives. You say, well, you just don't know. We're living in hard times. Well, let me tell you something. God doesn't know a thing about hard times. God can take care of His children. We're living in abnormal, artificial, superficial times. And I want you tonight to commit your way to the Lord. Trust also in Him. He'll bring it to pass. And I believe that God's people ought to be able to live by faith and trust God and let Him do what needs to be done. Of course, we're living in a time of practically no restraint in any department of American life. But I'm going a little further. I'm showing you that we got some sin for every disobedience. We got some disease for every sin and every disobedience. The next thing, this is very popular, but bottle babies have brought about the removing of the breasts. Since the mothers didn't use their breasts for what God told them to use them for, He said, let's let you cut them off. That may sound a little crude, but I mean, that's where we've been. That's where we've been. Used to not be like that when I was born. You remember that? There wasn't any woman in the community. You'd say it's none of your business. Well, I'm doing the preaching tonight. You listen here. I'm just trying to show you something that you need to look at every once in a while, instead of every time the doctor says something, you say, and you just go right down the road. But let me tell you something. There's something seriously wrong with the women of this country. And when something gets wrong with the life stream, then life's going to play out. And there was a time when the babies were born at home. And there was a time when people even died at home. And there was a time, believe it or not, when they even lived at home. Yeah. I mean, people had just come home. And I mean, they didn't come home to go anywhere. They just come home and said,